Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, "You Want to Talk to Wendy? I'll Get You Wendy." My first job when I was a teenager in the late 1990s was at a certain fast food restaurant whose mascot is a red-headed girl. The pay was horrible, even for those times, and management was generally belligerent and incompetent, but it was a job and gave me lots of stories. Now, given that we were a restaurant named after a person whose founder became the face of the restaurant in television commercials up to his death, we frequently had jerks come through who thought it was cute to say things like, "Is Wendy there?" or, when they're angry, "I know Dave Thomas and I'm going to get you fired." It was so annoying because it wasn't cute since it happened dozens of times a day, especially late at night on second shift. Now, at the time this takes place, a new manager had just completed her training and it was one of her first times managing by herself. I was working on drive-through when a couple of guys start going on the speaker, "Is Wendy there? We want to talk to Wendy." I try to ignore them since, as I said, this is a frequent occurrence, but these guys just don't know when to stop and just keep saying it all through their order. I was having a bad night. I hated working drive-through more than any other station at the restaurant, so their antics, which would probably just make me roll my eyes today, were beginning to make my blood boil. They get to my window, and they're these two redneck-looking 20-something guys who just keep giggling about how funny and clever they are. I really don't think they were high or drunk given their demeanor. I just think they thought they were delivering comedy club-worthy material. I'm trying to hand them their drinks and they just keep asking for Wendy. "Where is she?" one asks. "We want to talk to Wendy," the other one says. I've finally had about enough, and that's when I get a plan for malicious compliance. I go over and get my manager and tell her that there are two guys at the window who want to talk to Wendy. She grins, knowing exactly what I'm thinking, and walks over, opens the window, and looks at the guys. "Hi, I'm Wendy, the manager here. I heard you want to talk with me? How can I help you?" The guys just think this is the most hilarious thing ever and start erupting in laughter, when she looks at them dead serious, and points at her name tag. "No, really, my name is Wendy. How can I help you tonight?" They get really quiet and look at each other. You can tell this wasn't how they expected this to go, and they seem to have no witty retorts in them for if Wendy was actually there. Can we have some ketchup?" one of them finally asks. Wendy smiles, puts some ketchup in their bag, and hands them their order. The two drive off without another word while Wendy and I break down in laughter at what we just did. In the long run, what we did that night didn't stop other amateur comedians from asking for Wendy, but it sure did feel good nonetheless. In a generally sucky job that could be really hostile at times, Wendy was a pretty cool boss. Wherever she is today, I hope she's living her best life. The next story is titled, "Why Wouldn't You Price Match Your Own Website?" Years ago I saw a big box retailer had a really nice TV on special on their website for about $300 off the in-store price. Their store app says they have the TV in stock, so I head to the store and ask their electronics supervisor if they would price match the website. He says no, if I want this TV right I'll have to pay full price for it. I know that when a website in-store pickup order comes in, a guy comes out from the back and picks an item off the shelf to fill the order. So I pull out the phone and order the TV for in-store pickup. Sure enough, 2 minutes later a guy comes out from the back and picks up one of the TVs that we're standing in front of, and carts it to the back. 3 minutes after that I get an email saying it's ready for pickup. Head to the desk, get my TV and head out. The next story is titled, "You Want Cheese, but no cheese? Fine." So I was eating at a local restaurant and I saw this mum with her 8-year-old or so son. The menu had an option to add things to meals by paying, i.e. cheese, bacon, and the kid started joking about wanting his plate with cheese but no cheese, and bacon with no bacon. The waiter arrived and the mum, continuing the joke in her whiny pitched, Karen-like voice, started saying all the compliments like, "I want it with X but no X." And the waiter started looking pissed because they were following a dead, oversaid joke, repeatedly saying it 20 times or so. Their bill arrives and surprise. The ingredients that they added and removed are now on the bill, costing them $20 or so. They get pissed off, but pay it and angrily leave the place. The next story is titled, "Clock in and out at the exact time?" Sure. So this was a few years ago and I worked on the floor of a logistics facility. This job was about an hour's drive from my home and it started at 6 a.m. Not really a problem for me, but I like to plan for unexpected delays in my commute, so I tended to be 15 to 20 minutes early each day. That was just easier and less stressful for me. One of my bosses noticed and gave me key privileges and taught me the morning routine of opening the facility, as I was often the first person there. Cool, I like to get started when I'm there anyways, so why not? I got in the habit of clocking in whenever I passed the clock we used for that. Then I continued with turning on the lights and other parts of the morning routine. This worked like a charm. I still had to work a full day, but my boss was very flexible whenever I asked to leave early or take a day off. We were all happy. But then that boss quit. New boss wasn't as flexible or practical. After a month he called me into a meeting and basically told me for clocking in early. Even after I had made it clear that this wasn't a scheme for me to get extra overtime, I worked full day from 6 a.m., and that it helped the facility startup process each morning, I was told not clock in early. Why not? Oh, that was simple enough. Whenever I clocked in early, my boss had to make 3 extra clicks on his mouse when approving the hours to be paid. If I only clocked in and out at the correct time each day, he wouldn't have to do all this extra work. At first I was like, okay, I get it, you have many more employees than me, and still did the unlocking and morning routine. I just made sure not to clock in before 6 a.m. But then my boss started behaving more and more like an ass towards both me and my colleagues, and my will to help out evaporated. The opening and closing routines each took about 15 minutes, and we were a group of 5 people who had done this whenever that was needed and practical. In fact, new boss hadn't needed to do this much at all, as somebody had always done it for him. We got together and compared scores. Nobody was getting any benefits or flexibility out of this boss for doing the extra work. And absolutely no overtime pay for any of us. It didn't take us long to agree to stop doing this for the company without at least getting some favors in return. Next Monday I arrived at 5:40, but decided to sit in my car and listen to music, waiting for 6 a.m. At 6 a.m. there were 40 cars and about 60 workers wondering why the building was still locked when I got out to open. I merely opened the doors and clocked in, went to my workstation and started working. This meant that many of the workstations were delayed 5 to 20 minutes before they could even see how much work was lined up that day. And since there was a rule that you had to change into workwear before you clocked in, many people were late that day. All day long I was waiting for a response from my boss, but he worked 9 to 17. Fun note, the facility closed at 21, and by then my boss was usually at home. So when they were about to clock out, one of my colleagues called him and asked who was locking up tonight. Because he couldn't do it, as he too had been told to clock out at the exact time. So my boss had to drive for 20 minutes each way to lock up. He was furious at having his evening interrupted like that. Tuesday went much the same way as Monday, except that boss reluctantly had to approve 15 minutes of overtime for the guy locking up. No mention of the morning routine yet. Turned out boss didn't notice the delayed start and reduced productivity until his boss asked why the first trucks leaving the facility tended to be 20 to 30 minutes late all of a sudden. This meant they got stuck in rush hour traffic more often and even more delayed throughout the day, resulting in more delay fees and lower customer satisfaction. My boss knew that I had opened the facility for a while, and he actually asked my boss why I no longer did it. When my boss evaded him and didn't give him a clear answer, he sought me out and asked me himself. I told him straight out that I had been told to not clock in early, and since I wasn't on the clock there was no reason for me to work. The boss had in effect deprived the company of 15 to 20 minutes of free work each day from me and the rest of the group of 5 by insisting that we clocked in and out at the exact times. Not to mention the cost of the delays caused by the late start. And all this because he couldn't be bothered to make 3 extra clicks on his mouse to overrule the clock when approving the pay. The very next day we were informed that opening and closing routines were now a part of the job description for the group of 5 and that we would get paid for the extra time spent. Next payday the group got together and calculated that we were in effect paid almost a full hour for re-adding the opening and closing routines to our work. 2 weeks later my boss was laid off, quit or something. We were never told the details and were told not to ask about it. Next boss just groaned in exasperation when he heard what had happened. He was a good guy and an even better boss. I was sad to quit the job when he was there, but another opportunity came along and it was too good to pass on. The next story is titled, You Want Me to Set a Goal? I Choose Zero. A while back, the grocery chain I work at tried to set goals for rewards credit card sign-ups. We were supposed to ask every customer at least 3 times if they wanted to sign up, once before starting the transaction, once in the middle of ringing them up, and then once at the end of the transaction. They made us set a monthly goal, that if we didn't meet it, would be a write-up. When they asked me for mine, I set a goal of 0 because that was ducking stupid and I wasn't going to be forced to make people sign up for a credit card they didn't want in the first place. They tried to write me up for insubordination, but I'd read the fine print and there was no minimum we had to meet for our goal. Funny enough, they only did that for about 3 months before deciding it was maybe a bad idea. The next story is titled, Don't Leave It Up to Me to Come Up with a Solution. I'm a procurement guy in the mining industry. My team sits in between the sales team and a couple of hundred suppliers all over the globe. Specifically, we're the emergency fulfillment team who steps in to fill back orders where there are no parts available in the country and it's stopping a machine from working or causing a safety issue. Obviously, a dump truck or an excavator, or any machine really, being out of action on a mine site can cause a flow-on effect to the running of the mine, which leads to a pissed-off customer screaming at the sales team, who then put pressure on my team, causing us to apply the same pressure to suppliers, freight forwarders, distribution centers, etc. until the parts get to where they need to be. Now, understanding a supply chain is not a complex thing. The process is the same every time, the only difference is the previously mentioned pressure being applied. The way my team works is that every 2 hours we run a report and get a new list of parts that we need to source. We figure out where we're going to get the parts from, raise purchase orders against suppliers, calculate an ETA based on what the supplier tells us, including estimated transit time, then enter all of the details and ETA information into an Excel spreadsheet, which is uploaded onto our internal intranet each morning. The sales team can then check it and update customers if they have any questions about their back orders. Here's where I introduce the manager and team leader of the sales team. Between them they have about 45 years of industry knowledge and seemingly zero knowledge of how a supply chain works. With all of their collective time spent in the industry, they deem it unacceptable that less than 7% of the 12,000 parts our team source per month fail our quoted ETAs. Mind you, ETA means estimated time of arrival. Suppliers don't ship stuff when they say they will. Flights get delayed. Stuff gets lost. There's a million things that can go wrong that are totally out of our control, but none of that matters, it's just not good enough. Fed up with constantly being told how crap we are, as well as how we need to come up with a solution, I sat down with the team and came up with a strategy to ensure that they could never whinge about missed ETAs again. We changed our team's working priorities. Priority number 1 now is to check every line on the spreadsheet 10 days before the ETA to make sure it's on track. Now for the fun part. No point checking the ETAs and updating them but not telling anyone. So I went away in my own time and using YouTube, Google and whatever else I could find, I taught myself Visual Basic Programming language over the course of a month or 2. With this knowledge I wrote some scripts that I distributed to my team, and with the click of a button we can now email the sales team every time we update an ETA. That's 700 to 800 extra emails that they have to action each month with no extra manpower. Higher-ups absolutely love the initiative and expect the sales team to proactively inform the customers of the changes so that they can rework their schedules accordingly. How's that for a solution? To top it off, with the new VBA skills I've learned, I've managed to automate a massive percentage of my team's work. Conservative analysis is a saving of about 150 man-hours per month, so we have way more time to stay in front, pressure those suppliers, or just kick back and relax once finished, making heaps more work for the sales team. The next story is titled, Get Here with Your Aunt. So, a bit of a backstory, I was home in my dad's house, and mum was at my grandma, 16 kilometers away from the city we were in. They are divorced. They don't like each other. Mum especially don't like that I'm staying at my dad's place with my boyfriend, because she generally don't like him. To the story, it was a nice Thursday morning. Mum said before that I should go to my grandma in a reasonably time, important for later. I usually wake up and crawl out of the bed about 10 AM, which is fine by her, so reasonable time would be the 12 o'clock bus, because the bus and train only goes there every 2 hours. I walked up at 8, and intended to go to Granny with the 12 o'clock bus. My aunt and cousin were invited too, and I know that they won't get there just before lunch. That was my reasonable time. Then Mum called me up at 10 to wake me up, but then changed her mind, because she wanted to let me sleep. I called her back, when I saw that I missed her call, and she asked me, when will I go to Granny? I told her that I might go with the 12 o'clock bus. She was fuming. She started yelling at me so loud that my boyfriend could hear her from the other side of the room. Her problem, she expected me to be there at 10. Even though she didn't wanted to wake me up at 10. She was so angry that I stay with my boyfriend and dad a wee bit longer than what she expected, that she demanded me to call my aunt and go with them, because they will get there faster. If my aunt says she would be there at X o'clock, you must add 10 to 30 minutes to it. Cue malicious compliance. I called my aunt, dropped hints, and asked her when will they go there. She said, maybe a quarter before noon. She also called my mum when will she go, and I could only accept her face. She eventually got to my dad a few minutes before noon, and we got there late, later than when I would ride with the bus. But she wanted me to go with them, am I right? The next story is titled, Reservation Required? Alright then. Walked into a brunch spot that my girlfriend and I frequent. Host, do you have a reservation? Me, no, we never do. Host, we've got a 30 minutes wait, I can take your number down and call when it's ready. I suggest walking around, and if you don't find anything else we'll call when it's ready. So I put our name on the list, but see there's at least 6 tables open. Not wanting to cause a scene, we walk back outside, browse to open table and find there's a reservation available in 15 minutes. Confirmed that, walked right back inside and said we're a little early for our reservation, seated immediately. The next story is titled, Want me to retake my classes? Sure, I can do that. So this all happened when I was around 26. I had just been married a few years prior and had also started going to college around the same time I had gotten married. I was now in my final year of college, and I had checked to see what classes I still needed to take. To my surprise, half the classes I had taken the first year at college had been removed from my record, and not only that, but they were going to be removed from the college for the next 2 years after the next semester. I also needed to take some other classes as well that semester. Cue malicious compliance. I decided that I would indeed retake the classes now instead of wait, and I would also take my other classes as well. I was studying hard and was barely able to keep my grades in all my classes around AB level. Luckily I was married and my wife had a good paying job, so I didn't have to worry about money as well. Around midway through the semester I was called to the head of campus's office, and so I went assuming I was in big trouble or something. The head of campus, I'll just call him head, asked me why I was taking those classes as I had already completed them the first year at the college. I explained how they had been removed from my record and all that. He nodded and said to me that he couldn't allow me to do this as it would make it look like to heads higher ups that his classes at his campus weren't challenging enough, and because I was able to pass so many classes with a pretty decent grade that the classes would have to be made harder. Head continued and said how he didn't want to do that to the students or the teachers, so for the next 15 to 30 minutes we sat down and he personally marked that I had all those classes done. Needless to say, I was feeling a lot less stressed after that, and I graduated with flying colors. The next story is titled, I don't want to hear another word from you until we get home. You got it. This was in the 1970s and I was about 8 years old. We were at the grocery store and I was not on my best behavior. I was talking back to my mother, hassling my sister, and in general not being the kind of child I would want to have to deal with. I don't remember what in particular got me going, but as we started driving home I said something to my mum as she was driving that just set her off, and she said, I don't want to hear another word from you until we get home. I knew I was gonna get it because the next words were going to be, wait until your father gets home, which was code word for a spanking. So we are driving home, in my father's prized '67 candy apple red Mustang, and I'm watching out the window. I see a woman riding a horse down the opposite side of the road. I see the horse buck the rider and I see the horse running in our direction. We lived out on the country and seeing horses being ridden on the side of the road was common. This however was not. Being on my best behavior, I kept my mouth shut. Very quickly the horse's front leg hit the car on the bar that separates the windshield and the driver's side window just as my mum saw the horse. The horse staggered and ran off the road, apparently uninjured. My mum was stunned and pulled the car over. She said, "What just happened?" I wasn't going to say anything, I didn't want to get in trouble. A bystander ran into her house to call the police and someone else ran to check on the rider. She looked at me, asked me, "Did you see what happened?" I nodded. She said, "What happened?" I said, "Am I allowed to talk now?" I thought that was a risk I'd take given I was being asked a direct question. She said yes. I told her exactly what happened. She asked me why I didn't say anything. I responded, "Well, you told me you didn't want to hear another word from me until we got home." She just shook her head. The rider and everyone else were just fine. I saw the horse after that as well. My mum never drove that car again and my dad sold it shortly after it was repaired. To this day I tell the story of that time my mum hit a horse with her car, which still sets her off, a little. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.